So I really want to talk a bit about the Eightfold Path today because I've been thinking about it a lot this week, and it's sort of been my go-to practice, and it often is, especially in difficult times or times when I don't really know what else to do. And and if you're somewhat like me, right now might be a very perplexing time to be alive because we are experiencing so much unrest and upheaval all the time, every day. The realities of climate change and the lack of meaningful action, the terrifying rise of anti-Semitism in this country and around the world, and the horrible killing of civilians in Israel and Gaza, and the continuing wars in Ukraine and Yemen and elsewhere, and the seeming lack or impossibility of people to sort of agree to a common moral compass. Um, Sometimes it feels like these universal values, or values that we take to be universal, of integrity and care and honesty, are really not so universal anymore. And of course, we're living with deep political and social divisions in this country. And so there's that question, what can I do? I care, but what can I do? And what can I do that will really help? So this year I've sat a number of retreats of different lengths, from a day to a couple of weeks, and sometimes I was a participant and sometimes I was teaching or leading them. And in October I was part of the teaching team for the annual queer retreat at Dhamma in Joshua Tree, which is the same retreat center where we're holding our ICD retreat that's open to everyone on February 28th through March 3rd. And at that retreat in October, it was shortly after October 7th, and there was a lot of grief and anguish in the room, and very different responses to that grief, different viewpoints and different ways of holding the grief that we were feeling. And of course, in a silent retreat, we don't communicate in the same ways, but people placed items and symbols and photos on the altar of those that they were practicing and caring for. And twice in the Zendo we lit candles for Shabbat, and prayers for peace were offered in the community and for the world. And so there's that question, or there's a response to how do we stay in practice even when our hearts are breaking and we don't really know what to do. And one of the most powerful things that I've learned that we can do is to simply be together in community in the face of what is, no matter what that is. And that is the power of sangha. Sangha is the practice of making space, creating safety or safe enoughness that we can rest and restore and heal and grow from. So before I started on the Dharma path, my own inclination and my own personal tendencies were definitely not to be much of a joiner, and that's true of my conditioning, I'll say. What the teachings call the sankharas, our patterns and tendencies of mind that we take to be ourselves, and that influence how we relate to the world, particularly how we habitually relate to the world when our capacity for mindfulness isn't strong and we're sort of on autopilot or not quite present in the way that we are when we're really deeply mindful. And so it's been interesting to watch myself become so involved in community, Dharma communities in particular, over the last 11 years, becoming involved in what we call sangha, this refuge of people practicing together. And it really seems to co-arise with my practice. It's not something that I'm trying to make happen intentionally, but it just naturally arises the more that I practice. The more that I practice Dharma and read Dharma and practice with it on my own, the more that I tend to want to be around others who also do, who also value this path, and to seek out and support communities that exist to share this wisdom and the practices. And the Buddha Dharma, the Buddha practices aren't the only way to freedom or liberation, but they are one way. And for me, they've been the most powerful way, the most effective and possible for me to grasp. And I think that's because of the emphasis on the practical side of the liberating process, where we really work on this for ourselves and we work on it in community. And so this thing that we call sangha, this practicing together, is considered one of the three refuges, along with the Buddha and the Dharma, places where we can find a home, places that we can be at home in, a shelter from the storm. And this is the kind of home that isn't dependent on paying rent or a particular place, but it's a home that we can carry with us wherever we go. And so not a refuge or a retreat from the world, but a shelter in the world, a shelter that we can carry with us. And it's amazing how we can do that. So last week, some of you were at the half-day retreat that we did at the Meisel Center. And unfortunately, we were in a room that shared a divider with a rather loud group of people having a homeowners association meeting on the other side of it. And it was very distracting. And yet we all stayed. We all stayed in that refuge of Sangha together. And I don't know if any one of us would have stayed there alone, by ourselves for the 3 hours that we were practicing. I don't know if we could have stood it, but we could together. We could hold it together. And it was really quite amazing to me. I after the first walking break, I thought, oh, probably 5 or 10 people will leave, but no one did. We all stayed. And I think that's a testament to the power of Sangha. It supports our practice. And that is really what the Buddhist path is about, is practice. And I notice that feeling of homecoming as I enter into communities like ours, or I go on retreats, and there's always a little part of me that's like, wait, what are you doing? You're not a joiner, you don't do groups. And then when I enter in, whether it's a physical space or an online meeting like this, I watch and I notice as my heart softens and opens, and it really surprises me sometimes that I feel joy spontaneously arising. Oh, okay, I'm home here. I see our names and our faces and feel the presence of our practice. These are the people I really want to be with. I want to be with them, and I want to be with the teachings. There is refuge here, and there is home here. And sometimes, it's just like sitting down for that first sit together, and I'm like, oh yeah, this feels so good. Because that feeling of relaxing in is what Sangha is, and being supported by and supporting each other. And so whatever I come in with, and for most of us right now, it might be all kinds of things, a lot of uncertainty, maybe fear or rage or despair or worry or terror or grief or loss or confusion. Whatever I come in with, I come into a space that is larger than that is capable of holding more than only the top levels of concern or activation that might be present in my experience. I come into this space that can also hold the stillness that lives inside of us, that lives in each of us. And I come into community with people who remind me that what I value, compassion, truth, love, connection, is also shared and valued, and really, really importantly, is cultivated. Because again, this is a practical path. Cultivation, bhavana, is one of the bedrocks of this path. And so that reminder, that support of together and not alone is so needed right now. Sangha feels to me like the truth, the demonstration that we are not alone. Like I discovered at the half day, like, wow, we're not alone here. We're really together, even in the face of unpleasant circumstances. So a number of years ago, I had a very dear friend named Linda who was a Dharma friend, pretty much my first Dharma friend. And we didn't live in the same town, but we would talk quite a bit by instant message and stuff, and we would meditate together. We'd send each other little reminders through the day that, oh yeah, let's go meditate. And I remember Linda saying, about our friendship, that we will stumble down this path together. And I've always remembered her words and the pointing toward in her words that we will stumble, for sure, and that there is a path. And that's what I want to reflect on for a moment, that there is a path. Again, this is a practical cultivation. There is a path from clinging to letting go. There is a path from greed to generosity. There's a path from aversion to open-heartedness and equanimity, from hatred to love, from ignorance to wisdom, from anxiety and fear to a peaceful heart. And this path belongs to all of us. So what I'm talking about here, of course, is the Buddha's noble or ennobling Eightfold Path. Wise view, wise intention, wise speech, wise action, wise livelihood, wise effort, wise mindfulness, and wise concentration. I'll talk a little bit more about these strands, these places on the path. There's many beautiful ways of looking at it. But I also want to bring in something that Hugh O'Neill, who has taught a few times at ICD, it's been a number of years, and Hugh is Beth Mulligan's partner, and Beth is someone that many of you know who was our guiding teacher and recently offered an MBSR course through ICD. And Hugh filled in for Beth one day when she couldn't teach for us. And this was sort of in the middle of COVID. And something he said in his talk just really stayed with me, because he said, and I'm paraphrasing a bit, when I don't know what to do, I can practice the Eightfold Path. And that's been coming back to me a lot in recent weeks. When I don't know what to do, I can practice the Eightfold Path. There's this beautiful invitation to come back to the path, come back to the community of practitioners, come back to the practices that nourish and support, come back to what you love. When I don't know what to do, I can practice the Eightfold Path. So there's a kind of mindfulness of the path in that, remembering that whatever is here, that I have a choice in how I relate, that the world keeps unfolding and changing and challenging me and challenging us, and that this is its nature, and that I am not stuck in that world, in the sense that I am also changing, unfolding, growing, responding, relating, and that I'm no more a fixed entity than anything else in the universe. It's one of the contemplations that we do in Buddhism, is like, do you know of any fixed entities? Are there fixed entities in your experience? And if you investigate and find that there are not, or you can't find any, that's actually really good news, because it's the source of liberation, because it means that I am not stuck, that I am not a limited, finite being that the world is happening to and that change is impossible. So instead I'm in relationship with my world and my experiences, and actively responding, creatively responding, hopefully, moving with what's here. And sometimes I may stumble, and sometimes I may soar, but I'm not fixed. So I wanted to offer a poem by Jennifer Wellwood, and it's called Unconditional. Willing to experience aloneness, I discover connection everywhere. Turning to face my fear, I meet the warrior who lives within. Opening to my loss, I gain the embrace of the universe. Surrendering into emptiness, I find fullness without end. Each condition I flee from pursues me. Each condition I welcome transforms me and becomes itself transformed into its radiant jewel-like essence. I bow to the one who has made it so, who has crafted this master game. To play it is purest delight. To honor its form, true devotion. And so this practice of the Noble Eightfold Path is like choreography or a songbook or a palette. It's creative, it's alive, it contains movement toward freedom. It's the means of transformation. It's the means for facing fear, of surrendering, of finding fullness without end. And it's the Buddha's prescription, his medicine for the First Noble Truth, the suffering in the world and in our experience, the sorrows that we all face, and the ways that I might delude myself, the ways that I might be clinging or pushing away that which is, trying to make my life become totally in control and fixed, when it can never be fixed. So what the Buddha is offering here in this Eightfold Path is sometimes described like 8 strands of a strong cable that's capable of lifting us out of greed, aversion, and delusion. So there's the rope of craving that it's said that we often hang on to, and we swing on this rope from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime, always hanging on. And if you don't believe in multiple lifetimes, then we hang on to that rope from day to day and week to week and year to year. But there is another rope that we can use to steady ourselves, to guide ourselves. We can let go of that rope of craving. And we can instead hold ourselves with the Buddha's Eightfold Path, the rope of the Eightfold Path. These beautiful qualities and practices that we develop together, that wrap around each other, that strengthen each other, something that can be sure and strong in our own practice. So these 8 areas of practice include wise view, and that's the first, but you want to see it. Actually, I want to show you something because this teaching is so foundational. It's actually the graphic representation that's most common of the Dharma. I mean, we see the Buddha all the time, that's true, but in the Buddha's lifetime he didn't want images of himself, and it took many hundred years before there started to be Buddha images. But the symbols of the Dharma were often 2 footprints where the Buddha had been or had been walking, and the other very common symbol is the Dharma wheel. And I'm going to share screen and show you a couple of representations of that. So first, this one happened to be up first. So your emoji, like all the major world religions have an emoji. And so for Buddhism, it's the wheel, and it's the eight-spoked wheel. And you can see that right there. And here's the wheel of Dharma again on the roof of the Jokung temple in Lhasa. And what you're seeing, the reason that there are eight spokes is because of the Eightfold Path. And there you see the Eightfold Path, wise view, wise or right, fitting in the sense of fitting, wise view, wise intention, wise speech, wise action, wise livelihood, wise effort, and then they switch them. It should be wise mindfulness next, and then wise concentration. But it's this place of strength. And when you look at it in this way, it almost looks like the wheel of a ship or something in this particular thing. But it is what steadies us and helps us move in the direction of liberation and freedom. So it's actually the symbol of the Dharma. And so first we have wise view, and this is the wisdom that comes from our practice, from the insights that we gain through our direct experience, and that we're always developing and refining. And then we have wise intention, and these are the intentions of non-harming or compassion, intentions of letting go or generosity, intentions of non-hatred, or said positively, loving kindness. Wise speech, relating to others and ourselves with speech that's true, kind, connecting, and useful. And then we have, and it's also really important in wise speech to notice speech that isn't true, kind, connecting, and useful. And when I see that, knowing that, okay, that's not the most skillful speech, and I don't have to believe it, and I don't have to accept it from others, and I don't have to repeat it to myself, and I don't have to pass it on to others. And then we have wise action, which starts the ethics part of the path, which I talked quite a bit about the last time I was here. This is how we relate to others, to humans, to animals, to the living systems of the earth in ways that are non-harming and supportive, giving the gift of no fear. It's amazing to walk through the world and think about that, to ask ourselves, can I walk through the world in a way that gives no fear, or as little fear as possible? Wise livelihood. Can I make my living, can I support myself in ways that don't harm myself or other living beings or the earth, that aren't extractive, that aren't exploitive, that are fair? Wise effort, and this is about encouraging our own capacity for supportive, helpful thinking and practice, and letting go of what doesn't support with discernment and with wisdom that comes from experience. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment. But part of wise effort is to follow the path in a way that is in tune, that is kind to ourselves. The Buddha never said to turn our practice into a stick to hit ourselves with. That's not what wise effort is about. Wise effort is about kindness and care and persistence. And then wise mindfulness, which is the skill that we develop of directing and sustaining attention, a training, bringing our kind, open presence to whatever we experience. And we do that like we just did, training on the cushion in relatively supportive conditions with the breath or sound or sensation to strengthen our capacity to keep that faculty alive and present so that we can apply it to whatever's happening in our day-to-day life. So this is the part of the path that keeps us awake and sensitive to life. This is the opposite of being asleep, and this is where we truly find our choice. And then wise concentration, which I talked about last time. This is the gathering of the energies of mindfulness and attention, not compressing, not contracting, but just gently bringing in a deepening of awareness. And as concentration develops, the states of joy and happiness and contentment and equanimity arise. Stillness of mind, we sometimes call that. And sometimes we experience this in our meditation, and not always. But that's concentration, is that gathering, that continued practice. And in that open, aware stillness, however much it's accessible to us, we see deeply into the nature of our own experience. And this seeing with wisdom and kindness increases our store of that first factor, wise view. So it's very circular, and all of the factors on the path can support each other. It's not a step-by-step path. It's not like we practice one factor and perfect it and then go on to the next. We're invited to practice all of them, and practice in one part of the path will strengthen and deepen the others. So there's a lot there, and when I don't know what to do, I can practice the Eightfold Path. I can remember this. And all of these locations on the path are ours for exploration, depending where we're drawn at the moment or what's alive for us. Maybe I really want to look at my speech right now. And if I find I've spoken in unskillful ways, I do what I can to make amends. But in the way that we practice, there's no blame or shame about it. Just, okay, maybe that wasn't wise speech. That wasn't in line with my intentions for non-harming and kindness. Maybe there are other ways that I can communicate with this person that are more informed by my commitment to wise intention, that are more useful and helpful. So we're lucky, most of us, that we are living in relative peace right now, at least in our day-to-day lives. I am assuming most of us are able to take care of ourselves and not be in too much conflict. And that's a place of great privilege. We have a lot of choice, and when we have that choice, so what do we want to do with that? So I can practice the Eightfold Path. Today, I can choose to relate with interest and curiosity to whatever comes up in my life. Instead of just letting life happen to me, instead of running after fleeting pleasures, fighting what's uncomfortable, and numbing myself when I'm confused. This very life, these very circumstances, whatever they are the path of wakefulness. The contents of this moment are the contents of awakening, says Koban Chino Adaga, and I love that so much. The contents of this moment are the contents of awakening, not the contents of that moment over there when the weather is perfect and my body has no aches and pains and there's enough money in the bank and my relationships are all peaceful and supportive and the world is at peace. That moment when I've got it all together, that time when people start stop acting crazy and the world stops acting crazy. But actually right now, the contents of this moment right now, this is where I get to practice the Eightfold Path. And can I be where I am with as much kindness and compassion as possible? Letting go of personal blame and shame helps tremendously. And the factors of kindness and self-care are essential to this process. And so just a little bit on wise effort, because wise effort, or effort, is such a loaded word in English. Our concept of effort is tied so closely to achievement. Please make an effort, we're told, or you're not making enough of an effort, try harder. You'll only get out of it what you put into it. Try harder, make an effort. It's never enough. And no one really has to say these things to us. For most of us, it's pre-installed by family and school, dominant culture and zero-sum thinking. It's very easy to feel a sense of pushing and striving, even in this practice, to get caught, to trigger that pattern, that conditioning, that sankhara of never enough, to get into a sense of striving and to think that that's what the practice of wise effort is asking. And that's not the kind of effort that the Buddha was talking about, because when we remember that second factor of wise intention, non-harming, non-ill will, kindness, letting go, and we let that inform our effort, then effort becomes something much lighter, kinder, invitational, closer to play. And it's taken me a really long time to learn that and accept it. So I wanted to read a passage from Thich Nhat Hanh, the beloved teacher of so many of us. And Thich Nhat Hanh writes, Buddhist practice is based on non-violence. And he asks us to be tender with our experience, our breath, our thoughts and our feelings, our bodies and our difficult emotions. And he says, in Buddhist meditation, you do not turn yourself into a battlefield with good fighting against evil. Both sides belong to you. They are completely organic things. If you look deeply at a flower, at its freshness and beauty, you will see that there is also compost in it, made of garbage. The gardener had the skill to transform this garbage into compost, and with this compost made a flower grow. In the practice, we see that all of the mental formations, such as compassion, love, fear, sorrow, and despair, are organic in nature. We don't need to be afraid of them because transformation is possible. Just by having this deep insight into the organic nature of mental formations, you become a lot more solid, a lot calmer, and more peaceful. With just a smile and mindful breathing, you can begin to transform them. So this is that taking refuge in the fluid, changing nature of reality. We still practice the Eightfold Path to move toward freedom. And since nothing is fixed, transformation is possible. And that's the effort of the Eightfold Path. Remembering it, seeing how we can live it, but not striving, not blaming, not goading, just remembering our own agency, our capacity to incline the heart and mind in the directions that truly benefit us, and that this world of beings needs so much. What does it look like to frame our effort with self-care instead of striving? So I wake up in the morning, and before I get up, I often feel all those uncertainties and fears and despairs and anxieties just waiting there like yesterday's clothes to be put on. And I know that I can spend the day pushed and pulled by my emotions, my reactions, or I can spend the day in distraction and not really deal with any of it. And after all, those responses don't take that much effort at all. Or I can think, here's a way to care for yourself. Here's a way to support and nourish and heal yourself. Oh, I can practice the Eightfold Path. I can practice this way of mindfulness. And to actually spend some time, maybe on the cushion or in the shower, to remember and reflect on my relation to each path factor. How is it showing up? What's going on with wise view? What are my intentions? How am I speaking to myself and to others? What sort of actions am I taking or contemplating? And what will those lead to? Will those lead to benefit? What about my livelihood? How am I earning my living? And how am I sharing that living? And that wise effort that we just talked about. Am I being kind to myself in my relation to my spiritual practice, this thing that I love? And, how is my mindfulness? Well, just being in there in the shower and running through the factors of the path, there's some mindfulness right there, something to be grateful for. And can I gather that more and more? Can I invoke this capacity for wise concentration so that I stay with the practice throughout the day? I can remember the practice, the intentions, the path, and frame the whole thing in kindness and love. So may I turn toward my experience with kind attention. Maybe you have some prayers or self-blessings that you offer in the morning. May I turn toward my experience with kind attention. May I live this day in a field of self-care, self-support, and care and support of others. May I abandon striving. May I put down the stick of self-reproach. May I release all pressure. And may I just rest into what is here, the contents of this moment, which are the contents of awakening. And may I always remember that when I don't know what to do, I can practice the Eightfold Path. And that this practice is of infinite benefit. May I let go of what doesn't support myself or others, and may I cultivate those wise and caring qualities that I know are inside of me and that are inside each of us. So, thank you for your attention to these words. I hope there is something helpful, even if it's just even if it's just a feeling. That's good too. So, yeah, not to be too abrupt, but we are getting toward the close, and so I want to just make sure to create space if anyone has any questions or thoughts or anything you'd like to share or ask. Okay, well, thank you, folks, so much for being here and creating sangha, and never underestimating the importance and the power of your individual presence to create sangha for others. It really is remarkable, and it's a powerful thing. So I really thank you for being here and supporting ICD, Insight Community of the Desert. I like saying that better than ICD. What's ICD? And I hope you will continue to practice with us. I'm not sure who's teaching next week. I think it's Mary, and then I'll be. That's Christmas Eve. It is Mary, and then I'll be leading on New Year's Eve, and we'll do some intention setting and something around that holiday. And if you are in a position to support ICD, please do, financially or volunteer. We always need that. And and mostly I just want to really appreciate your presence, and we'll close with a dedication of merit. So may the goodness of our practice and the goodness that lives in our hearts and our minds be shared with all beings in whatever condition they are in, whether strong or weak, whether rich or poor, whether in health or sickness, whether in peace or war. We share the merits of our practice with every being. May all beings know peace and freedom, and may all beings be awake. Okay, friends, thank you again, and hope to see you really soon.